even more so than they were an investigation into Hunter Biden. Quote, the White House plans to dismiss any investigation into Hunter as a conspiratorial witch hunt, but even Democrats concede Congress has a right to scrutinize a troubled military action that resulted in American and Afghan deaths. Some White House and other administration officials privately say an Afghanistan probe could prove more emotionally difficult and politically damaging. What the White House is privately panicked about began today. A congressional probe into one of the most humiliating foreign policy blunders this country has ever seen. What we saw in August of 2021 was blatant incompetence at the highest level, a full-fledged disaster overseas. As a withdrawal that was 18 months in the making, negotiated by Donald Trump to end a 20-year, multi-trillion-dollar disastrous foreign occupation, was completely botched by his successor, whose military delayed the withdrawal by 3 months and still managed to have absolutely no plan in place for a clean exit. Marine Sergeant Tyler Vargas Andrews had some of the most shocking testimony today in front of this House committee, describing Afghans being murdered by the Taliban in full view of the U.S. military during the evacuation, describing desperate Afghans attempting to kill themselves on razor wire fences after being denied access to the Kabul airport. Horrifying depictions of humanity, and it got worse. Here, Sergeant Vargas Andrews describes the moment that he located the suicide bomber that he says went on to kill 13 Americans at Kabul airport. He located that bomber, but was not allowed to kill him.
Over the communication network, we passed that there was a potential threat and an IED attack imminent. We asked him if we could shoot. Our battalion commander said, and I quote, "I don't know," end quote. Eventually, the individual disappeared. To this day, we believe he was a suicide bomber. We made everyone on the ground aware. Operations had briefly halted, but then started again. Plain and simple, we were ignored.
We were ignored. Utter confusion. Nobody knew what to do. A complete and total display of incompetence from the top down. Not long after, Sergeant Vargas Andrews was asked to help find an interpreter near Abbey Gate, which is what he was guarding. As he went down from his post, where he had spotted that suicide bomber, he went out into the crowd. The bomber that he couldn't get permission to kill then detonated his suicide vest.
A flash and a massive wave of pressure. I'm thrown 12 feet onto the ground, but instantly knew what had happened. I opened my eyes to Marines dead or unconscious lying around me. I saw how injured I was with my right arm, completely shredded and unusable. I saw my lower abdomen soaked in blood. I was awake through most of it, screaming, moaning, and cursing. I ask you to please ask me about getting shot at the tower in Abbey Gate and how no one wanted my report post-blast. Even NCIS and the FBI failed to interview me.
Nobody wanted to hear what he had to say. I think you know why. That bomber killed 13 Americans, took Sergeant Vargas Andrews' arm and leg, 18 other service members wounded, 170 Afghan civilians were killed. This was a massive suicide bombing. So how did we let this happen? Well, it wasn't overnight. This disaster unfolded over the final couple of months as military officials who have still avoided all accountability for this disaster made a series of mistakes, starting with abandoning Bagram Air Base way too early. Our home base for all of this for the 20-year war abandoned a full 2 months before the last troops were scheduled to leave. In early July, Bagram was shut down. The power was shut off. $7.2 billion in our equipment still there, laying in the dirt, which would become Biden's housewarming gift to the Taliban. A few days later, Biden announces the plan to be out by August 31. At this point, our intel community is telling Americans they felt the Afghan government would hold on to power. No word if they actually believed that. You'd almost feel better finding out that our intel community was once again lying about that, rather than to think that they could possibly be that incompetent. By early August, the Taliban is racing toward Kabul and taking over every city along the way. By mid-August, they controlled the capital. The U.S. still 2 weeks from being fully gone, and the Taliban is running the city that we're evacuating from. Biden sends 6,000 troops back to Afghanistan to try and hold down the fort while we evacuate our people and our allies. It is a full-blown disaster. The suicide attack happens August 26. Devastating for morale, devastating for our troops and their families, a massive foreign humiliation. And 3 days later, we bungle it again. Looking for retaliation for that suicide bombing, an American drone strike hits an Afghan aid worker and his family, killing 9 people, killing 7 kids. An entire family of good guys wiped out by friendly fire. The next day, the most iconic image from the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, the final C-17 takes off with desperate Afghans holding on for dear life to a jet that's about to travel 10,000 miles. They all start plummeting to the ground. Congressman Michael McCaul was at the helm of this hearing today. Here is how he describes what we saw in Afghanistan.
The State Department, mimicking the White House, consistently painted a rosy picture, ignoring the realities on the ground. What happened in Afghanistan was a systemic breakdown of the federal government at every level, and a stunning failure of leadership by the Biden administration. We now know that he left more than 1,000 American citizens in Afghanistan. In addition to the almost 200,000 Afghan partners and allies that we promised we would save. We promised them we would help them, only to abandon them to the Taliban.
It's powerful stuff, and you start thinking about the images of what they described. People committing suicide because they don't want to be left to the Taliban, going up to the Abbey Gate, trying to get out of the country, and then killing themselves right there because they can't get out of the country. That's the reality. That's what our soldiers had to go through. Nobody is more aware of this humiliation than our adversaries, all emboldened by this, loving the landscape of the world with weak and incompetent American leadership. 5 months after that withdrawal, Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. China is now sizing up Taiwan and talking some serious trash just this week to the United States. And one problem we haven't had to worry about in quite some time, terrorism on our own soil, was talked about this morning at a Senate hearing with the Pentagon warning once again about ISIS.
I would say that ISIS-K poses a bit of a larger threat, but they are under attack from the Taliban regime right now, and it's a matter of time before they may have the ability and intent to actually attack the West at this point.